Is that the gallows pole I see? Welcome to the bunny rabbit's hole.
All right, like Craig said, this is the bunny rabbit's hole, and if this is your first time here, welcome. So what we do here at the bunny rabbit's hole is we take one central theme each and every week. We talk about that until something inspires us to talk about something different. But then when time or Craig's patience wear out, we get pushed back to the main topic, and then we continue on.
Right. And as Jason said, we pick a central topic. We spend usually about a week, sometimes longer, researching it. Depends on how intricate the topic is. But that we research both for and against. We don't just find stuff that fits our narrative.
Nope.
But we also include our opinion, and this is for entertainment. So if you're easily offended, now might be the time to go watch Billy Graham or something.
Exactly. Joel Osteen is calling your name.
Right. On his way to hell. Oh, sorry.
Well, I'm not going to go down that road right now. So, because I was about to ready to go on a whole bunch of Tammy Faye Baker jokes.
Yep.
And so, because I'm showing a little bit of restraint today, we're not going to talk about Tammy Faye Baker, but what are we going to talk about?
Today, we are going to talk about the baddest bitch that ever walked this planet. And I'm not talking about Ronda Rousey.
No.
I'm talking about the alleged very first female serial killer in the United States.
I think she's calling right now.
Yeah, she was. She's like, hey, fucker, quit talking about me.
You were supposed to tell me when you started.
Right. But yeah, Lavinia Fisher. Lavinia, I don't know how you pronounce it.
We're just going to call her Miss Fisher. And this is not to be confused with Amy Fisher.
Right.
The Long Island Lolita.
She could be a direct descendant,
It could be. They're kind of, they're both from America. I will just say that.
Yeah. There's a couple centuries that separate them, but
just a few hundred miles.
Just 1 century, really. Maybe like a century and a half. So, anyways, story of Lavinia Fisher. As you see in the background there, Jason has a picture of her up. She was known for her legendary beauty.
Mm-hmm.
She was born in 1793. And as she grew up, she met her husband, John Fisher. They got married, but they were also part of several different highway gangs that would rob people. And they had a hotel, which was called the 6 Mile House, because it was located 6 miles either north or south of Charleston. I can't remember which.
Right.
But so what they would do is, they ran this place, but they were also part of this highway gang that would go out and rob people. But they would entice people into their hotel, usually one person at a time, and they would sit down and have a meal with them before they tell them whether or not they had a room available. And they would interrogate them to see basically what they had, what they were carrying with them, all this other stuff. And, the legend has it, Lavinia would serve them tea spiked with oleander that would make them fall asleep. And then as they were asleep, she would pull a lever and the bed would collapse into the floor. And some would say there were spikes at the bottom wherever they landed, and it would impale the people, killing them. Others said that they would drop down to where her husband was waiting, and he would butcher them, and while they were still drugged up.
Right.
So
it's just fucked up, man.
Right. And now there's also a story of, this is one of my favorites. This is why I say she's such a badass bitch. But so this guy was trying to basically tattle on the highwaymen, the highway, and they caught him and they beat him. They're beating him severely, and he looked to Lavinia thinking, "Oh, she's a female. She'll have empathy for me. She'll save me." So he's pleading his case to her. She walked up, grabbed his head, slammed it through a glass window.
Yeah.
So this bitch was like, she's like, I ain't fucking around.
And
so
she was probably not the savior. She was more or less the, with John, the leader of this group.
Yes, I would say she's probably the brains of all the operations. So now we go on to, there's a man, John Peoples.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he was traveling, and he came across the 6 Mile House, which Lavinia and John, owned and ran.
Yeah.
So he comes in, asks if they had a room available. They said they didn't at the time, and so, but they invite him in for dinner. So they're feeding him dinner and going through these interrogations, and Lavinia's being really sweet to him, but yet he would notice John was just glaring at him the entire time. And so he refused to give in to the off-putting nature of John and just listen to Lavinia. And then she poured him a cup of tea, but he hated tea.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as she got up at that point to go check something. And as soon as she was out of sight and John wasn't looking, he dumped the tea out.
Yes.
So then she comes back and said, "Oh, a room did become available. We'll show you to the room and blah, 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 because, hey, his tea's all up. So, yeah, that's what we do now." So they take him up. He goes to the room, sees the bed, looks really comfy, but he sees a chair by the door. And he's kind of put off by all the questions and everything else. And he's listening to his intuition. His intuition is telling him some bad shit's going to happen here.
Right.
So
and the tea was a little off-putting because weren't they interrogating him, and then all of a sudden, "Oh, here, drink this tea."
Yes. Yeah.
And, "Oh, we have a room."
Yeah. Yeah, he found all this stuff just really, really strange. So he decides he's not sleeping in the bed. He's gonna sit in the chair all night and keep watch because he doesn't trust them. So as he's sitting in the chair, he starts dozing off because it's getting late.
Mm-hmm.
And then he hears a loud crash and looks over, and the bed is gone.
Yeah.
So he jumps out the window and escapes and runs and tells the authorities. So this is a lead up to how the authorities captured Lavinia and John Fisher.
Right. And if that part wasn't interesting, this gets interesting.
Yeah. So at this point, he goes, tells the authorities. The authorities have been after this highway gang forever, and they're starting to put 2 and 2 together. And so they come out, they arrest Lavinia and John, and they search their property. And on their property, they find the belongings of a bunch of different people who had stuff reported stolen, or merchants that were traveling and stuff like that. And supposedly they found tunnels, hidden tunnels, secret passageways, and a jail cell down in the base, the subfloor, where they'd hold bodies. And there was only like 2 bodies actually found on the grounds.
Right.
But I mean, a lot of this, there's really no way to prove it because it happened so long ago.
Mm-hmm.
So in 1819, they are arrested. And they're not arrested for attempted murder, they're arrested for highway robbery.
Yeah.
Which at the time was, the sentence for that was hanging by death. Or hanging by the neck till dead. So they're in their courtroom being tried. And the judge sentences them to death. And Lavinia looks at the judge and says, "You can't kill me. I'm a married woman." Because at the time in South Carolina, there was a law on the books that you could not execute a married woman.
Mm.
So the judge kind of looks at her and smirks. And then there's legend that he tells her right then, and other times they wait for it to happen. But basically, he's like, "If I kill your husband first, you're a widow, and then you're not married, and I kill you." So they appeal it. They're supposed to get another trial, but while waiting for the next trial, John and another prisoner, because they're all being jailed at the Old City Jail in South Carolina. If you watch Ghost Hunter episodes, lots of different paranormal groups have gone there. But they had found a loose stone under a window, and they made an escape route out, and they tied blankets together. And the guy that John was partnered with, he got down. John was halfway down before the knot slipped and the rope let go, and he fell. And so Lavinia was still stuck there. And so John was devoted to his wife.
Mm-hmm.
So he's like, "I can't leave without her." So they were trying to figure out a plan, and they got caught under an overpass somewhere, or under some bridge somewhere. and were put back in prison. So at this point now, their appeal has been thrown out the window. And
right.
so now
Literally out the window.
Yeah. So now John finds God and is repentant for everything he did, because they had some priest come in and, because he's trying to find a way out, basically.
Yeah, I think God lives in prisons because there's a lot of people that do that. Like Berkowitz became highly religious in prison.
Yeah. It's a crutch.
Yeah.
I mean, and
it's
understandable because you need something to get you through.
Yes.
So, so now at this point, he's trying to talk Lavinia into finding God, and she's like, "Yeah, fuck that shit." So now we reach the point, 1820, and it's time for their hanging. So they're taking. John walks to the gallows. Lavinia put on her wedding dress. Legend has it had her wedding dress on, and she refused to walk to the gallows. They had to pick her up and drag her to the gallows. So they got the rope around, John's neck. Hang John. He's dead. So now Lavinia's a widow. Now at this point, the thought behind her wearing her wedding dress, because again she had this legendary beauty at the time, was that one of the audience would give her a marriage proposal on the spot. So therefore she would not be a single woman, and she would be engaged, and they would have to let her go.
So, but let's go back to the legendary beauty thing for a minute. Now, does that just mean that she's clean and she doesn't have warts on her face?
All of her teeth?
Yeah, all of her teeth. I don't know what the standard for beauty was back then, because there was no Photoshop.
Right.
There was no runway models, so I don't know what the standard of beauty was in the early 1800s.
And the picture you had behind you is the first time I've seen a picture of her. But
she looks like a B-movie actress.
Right. And it just went off. You pissed her off.
Oh, well, sorry.
So at this point, John's dead. It's just Lavinia left. And I found this in a different article. She saw one of the deputies or something going over a piece of paper, and she thought that was her pardon from the governor. And she's looking at him and asking about it. He's like, "There's no pardon for you." So at this point, she is standing there, and I've heard this quote two different ways.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard it: if you have a message to send to hell, give it to me and I'll take it. Or if you have a message for the devil, give it to me and I'll take it. And then she did not wait for them to pull the lever. She jumped.
Oh. And
there's a legend that says she swung for 45 minutes before she died. And she did not die quietly.
No. Well, none of that screams quiet.
Right. So that is the entire story. Well, not the entire story, but that is the majority of the story of Lavinia Fisher. Of what they did, what happened, and just what a badass bitch she was.
Yeah. So I have to say this about it, though. There's an aspect of this that she doesn't get enough credit for, because Kurt Cobain, Amy Winehouse, Jim Morrison, John Michael Basquiat, Janis Joplin, Robert Johnson, Jimi Hendrix, Brian Jones all died at the age of 27. So
she's one of the 27 club.
She's one of the 27 club.
Nice. Yeah, and all these ghost hunters people, there's so many people that claim to have taken. I've watched a bunch of shit where videos or photos and audible from Lavinia Fisher caught. I'm like, it's a bit of a stretch.
So, okay. Here's my thing about that is, okay, she died, and was it in 1820?
Yes.
Yeah. So she died in 1820. How many other people have come and gone that have perished in that same location?
Right.
in that amount of time. How many other spirits have come and stayed in there? How would you know it was her?
Right.
That's a long fucking time ago to be trapped.
Yeah, I'm trying to find out how long that Old City Jail was open for. Let me see. I'm not finding. But yeah, I mean, you look at. I mean, obviously, the Old City Jail didn't shut down, and there's also said that during the time that they were incarcerated,
Mm-hmm.
the standards for living, and I mean, there was multiple tales of not just of physical abuse, but sexual abuse as well.
Hmm.
And if she was as beautiful as legend, she was probably raped by guards several times or other inmates.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, this is the slave owning South.
Right. And so, I mean, you got to kind of put that in perspective too. I mean, after being in there for a year, she's
Mm-hmm.
already an angry ass woman, you know.
Right. And I think
so,
kind of a slap to her face after the fact is, you know, she talks about taking messages to the devil or carrying messages to hell. She and John were both buried in Unitarian Church graveyard. So she's buried on church grounds.
What was it? Potter's Field?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking up Old City Jail Charleston right now, and I'll tell you how long it was open. So
because at the time most criminals' bodies weren't claimed by the families, so they just buried them there.
Right. So the Old City Jail was in operation from 1802 until 1939. So
Okay.
she was killed there in 1820. So it was still open for another 119 years after that.
Right. How many more people are hung?
Right. And let's also look at how many people died in that jail, not just being hung, but just died from whatever happened inside that jail.
Exactly. How many people die in our prisons?
Right.
Oh, Whitey Bulger lasted one day.
Yeah.
When they moved him to West Virginia.
Yeah.
And
lasted what, 2?
Yeah. So, and we still hung people here in the United States until 1965. The last one to be hung was in Delaware. Was a man named Billy Bailey.
Yeah. So 1939, all this shit was still going on.
Yeah.
You know, so Old City Jail has probably got lots of ghosts, and there's no way to tell if that's hers. I mean, it was said that her property, after they were captured, the townspeople were so angry about it, they went and burnt down 6 Mile House.
So, I'm sorry. You know, actually, I'm wrong. I'm wrong. One of them was there was sorry, I had to look it up really quick. Billy Bailey was the third to last. There was Charles Rodman Campbell, and the last one was actually a local to my area, serial killer. A killer of little children was a man named Wesley Allen Dodd. Now he's an interesting story, and there's tons of podcasts out there. But this man he would snatch up children and then rape and murder them. But he tried to take a kid from a movie theater, and the child's stepdad chased him out into the parking lot, got into his car, and then chased him down the road, and then finally got him pinned until the cops could get there and arrest him, and that's how the man was caught. But he was the last man in the United States to be hung.
Huh. What year was that? Do you
know? No.
Okay.
89.
89. Damn, that was like year before I graduated high school.
90. He died in January 5th. He was caught in 89, but he died in 1993.
Okay, I was after high school for both of us.
Yeah.
That was about the time we were living in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, we'll do the other side before we go deeper into Lavinia. Okay. Yeah,
let's get like Craig has mentioned, we explore both sides. So there's some counterpoints to a lot of this legend.
Yes. Now, there was a gentleman who wrote a book in, I want to say 2010, that debunked a lot of things that was said there. I'm trying to find it here. This website sucks. But the Bruce Orr, and his book was 6 Miles to Charleston, the true story of John Lavinia Fisher. It was published in 2010 and dispels a bunch of the myths. Now, there was an article that came out in the paper like the day after that, says that Lavinia died instantly, da-da-da. But at that time, they pretty much had to write shit like that.
Right.
But yeah, there was legend that they had a cellar full of corpses, but none were ever found. They only, like I said earlier, they only found 2 bodies. But let's dig into that for a second. Okay, this chick is smart enough to hatch all these plans for a highway robbery crew for killing and stealing from people inside her home. Is she going to bury people in her home?
Right. They were smart enough to develop a trapdoor system that dropped a whole bed.
Yeah.
That would go undetected from travelers until it was sprung. They were smart enough to know how much shit to put in a tea to make them sleep and not kill them.
Right.
I think she was probably smart enough not, and they were the highway robbery gang. That means they were mobile. They easily could have taken the remains and dropped them anywhere else.
Right. Yeah, and like one of the bodies they found was of a slave woman who was killed. But take everything from the story with a grain of salt, because you really have to do your own research, and you're not going to find a lot because, again, it happened in 1820.
Right.
And everything it's like that telephone game when you play with your friends, where you whisper something in somebody's ear and they're supposed to carry it down the line. By the time it gets back to you, it's an entire different story. So you have to really kind of dig into it and just try. Basically, the only way to do it is find old newspaper clips. But again, they were only allowed to write certain things.
Yeah, exactly. So, because some don't give a lot of credence to the fact that she had killed a bunch, other people actually give the moniker of first female serial killer to Jane Toppan, or Toppin, Toppan.
Okay.
She had confessed to, in 1901, she confessed to 31 murders. And she was quoted as saying her ambition was to have killed more people, helpless people, than any other man, woman who had ever lived. So she was kind of an evil bitch too.
Right.
But we're not going to talk about her today because we've already got a topic.
Right. So also with Lavinia, the guy that she smashed his head through the window, I forgot to mention, before she smashed his head through the window, she choked him.
Which
it was John Peoples. That was his name. I don't know how I said it before. That basically got them caught.
Right, the guy that ran away.
Yeah. But there's so much to this. I mean, there's so much to dig into that. I mean, motives. I mean, what makes a person say, I want to fucking kill people?
I've researched and listened to a lot of different and watched a lot of documentaries about serial killers, and one of the things they bring up is something that it's been debunked. It's called the Mcdonald Triad, where you can look at a person in their history. If you can see bedwetting, cruelty to animals, and setting fire, that's like the trademark traits of somebody that's going to or has psychopathic behavior and would probably become a serial killer. They've gone on and debunked a lot of that because there's a lot of serial killers that didn't do any of that shit. But it's weird to see the void of emotion, and there are certain ones like Tommy Lynn Sells. He was the coast to coast killer.
Mm-hmm.
He would jump trains and just kill random people. They have no idea how many people this man really killed, but he was just a bad seed from birth, and he was kind of like a dog, where a dog will even do bad things to get attention. So when he would do bad things, he would get beat, and he kind of equated beatings and brutality with pleasure.
Right.
And so it was, when you look at aspects like that, you start thinking you have to look at the nature versus nurture type of thing. But then you have people on the other side, like Ted Bundy, who grew up in a warm and loving home, even though later in his life he found out that his sister was really his mom.
Yeah.
You know, but those are he was raised by his grandparents, who he was told were his parents, and then his mom was really his sister, because his sister had him at a very, very young age.
Right.
But when he didn't know any of that growing up, he didn't find out till later, after he was already doing stuff. So he actually came up in a decent home.
Right.
And Jeffrey Dahmer came up in a decent home. I mean, his parents got divorced eventually, but he just was out there. So I don't think anybody really clearly understands why.
No, it's like there's something that just doesn't click right in their head.
Mm-hmm.
They have that penchant for cruelty, that penchant for, I want to see others hurt. It's almost as if it kind of goes hand in hand with like a narcissistic behavior.
Mm-hmm.
It really does. I mean, I'm not getting political today because I don't have the energy for it. But you look at your typical narcissist, and one of the things that they do is use words to hurt others.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying they're all fucking serial killers, because they're not, but if you're a serial killer, these people that are generally serial killers, with the exception of like Bundy, who I think had like a couple different wives that didn't know what he was doing.
Yeah.
But they're usually single people. They're not in relationships because they obviously aren't good at them, because they just want to kill people.
Yeah.
But, so I don't know. We could sit here and pretty much go back and forth on the psychology of it all. But I mean, because there's also, I'm sure a lot of them who were abused. Like, I mean, look at like Eileen Wuornos. Isn't that one that they made the movie out of?
Which one was that?
Eileen Wuornos.
Oh yeah, Monster.
Yeah. So I mean, you look at her and you saw what happened to her as a kid, and you kind of go, "Oh, it makes sense."
Right.
But does it?
And I think a lot with her too was the fact that her crimes were more of opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
She was picked up as a prostitute and ended up killing the John and stealing his stuff.
Right.
So is that really a serial killer? Even though she killed multiple people, but that's not really the hunter type of person that you would think of, like a Gary Ridgway, who until recently was the most prolific serial killer in America.
But with Eileen, though, wasn't it like, okay, yeah, she would kill people, play like the prostitute and kill her, whatever. But, after a while, you have enough money.
Right.
So it becomes a penchant. So I would dare say she did develop that hunter mentality.
And she probably got a lust for it near the end. The last couple of victims probably didn't need to die. Right.
And that's probably that's usually why they get caught. It's because they get so caught up in it, they start getting careless.
Yeah.
I mean, you got like, but then again, you have like the, famous tale of Jack the Ripper, who was never caught.
Right. And I'm glad you brought him up, because there's similarities between Lavinia Fisher and another diabolical, infamous character from our past called H.H. Holmes.
Okay.
Herman Mudgett was his real name. Dr. Henry Holmes was his pseudonym, but this man created a castle and there's been so many movies that have stolen this idea from him, that walls move, there's secret corridors, there's trapdoors in the beds, and then there was a whole room where he just had a torture, basically it was a torture palace where people would fall from their room into a pit where, some pits were full of acid, they said. There's a whole bunch of different stuff, but there's a lot of similarities between what he was doing and what she was doing. Now, he operated right around the time when the Chicago had their World's Fair.
Okay.
So there were so many, there were hundreds of thousands of people that flocked to Chicago during this time. Well, he ran a hotel, and he would rent rooms to people and just not write it down that they rented to him. It was that easy. Right. And when you had your own crematorium in the basement of this place, he could dispose of the bodies without anybody even knowing, and they were just thinking the chimney was, they had a fire going in the chimney. So, but the reason I bring him up, because you said about Jack the Ripper, there is a theory that some have debunked, but there's still a bunch of people that still believe it, that H.H. Holmes was Jack the Ripper. Huh. He was a doctor. And they say Jack the Ripper more than likely was either a butcher or a doctor because of the skill that he had with the blade. But there's and they found records of him traveling to England at this time. Now I don't know if they could actually put him in the Whitechapel area where the murders happened, but they could actually place him in England at the same time. Now there's a few other suspects that they have, but it's one of those ones where it's more fun to debate than to actually know.
Oh yeah. So I'm glad you said lots of movies are based off that, because when you started talking about it, the movie that popped in my head was 13 Ghosts with Matthew Lillard.
Yeah, I just watched that the other night.
Love that movie.
Yeah.
But I mean, that one it took the H.H. Holmes a step further, and they captured spirits and put them in there.
Yeah.
Angry poltergeist type spirits.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, like with that one, it kind of takes the whole premise of opening the gate to hell in the murder castle, put them together with technology.
Okay. I'm going to bring us back to Lavinia real quick.
Yeah.
Because I want to talk about John for a minute, John Fisher. And I got this from the website legendsofamerica.com. It's got, then there's /SC/Lavinia Fisher /.
Mm-hmm.
A local minister named Reverend Richard Furman was sent into council of Paris if they so wished. John freely talked to Furman and is said to have begged the priest to save his soul, if not his life. However, the cruel Lavinia would have nothing to do with it. On the morning of February 18th, 1820, the Fishers were taken from Charleston jail to be hanged to gallows behind the building. John Fisher went quietly, praying with the minister, whom he had asked to read a letter. That their writing style is not very well. Yeah. Before a crowd of some 2,000 people, the letter insisted on his innocence and asked for mercy for those who had done him wrong in the judicial process. Basically, he's trying to, say, hey, I'm the victim here.
Right, I'm wrongfully accused.
Yep, so he then began to verbally plead his case before the gathered crowd, but before he was hanged, he asked for their forgiveness. So that's a bit contradictory there. Yeah. So, I was innocent. This is a sham. Can you forgive me for what I did?
True. But which is still, can you forgive me? Then she probably went, oh, fuck. No, fuck it. You got any message you want to take to hell? I'll take them.
Right. And here's the beyond the legend part of that same article. Historical records do not indicate that hundreds of remains were found in the Fisher Basin. There were a group of bodies dug up on the property, but nothing to tie them to the Fishers for sure. And according to records, they were never charged with murder. So while Fisher is claimed to be the first female serial killer in the United States, the distinction likely belongs to Jane Tope, who confessed to 31 murders in 1901, who was found not guilty by reason of insanity. One thing the records do agree on is the fact they robbed many travelers in the highway robbery was still a hanging offense. Also called in question is the fact that Lavinia wore her wedding dress to her execution, or that she jumped from the scaffold herself. sometimes the legend is more fun to tell, and this one has lived on for a while in Charleston.
So something else. Now, this area of the country back then, there were still, believe it or not, pirates in this, in the early 1800s in Charleston, because we didn't have highway systems, we didn't have the Coast Guard, we didn't have, people were still robbing merchant vessels, and they were highway robbery men. That was their gang. They robbed people on stagecoaches, and they took their shit. But so this was still completely lawless area for the most part. I mean, obviously there was some law because they were captured and tried and hanged, but there was so much of this shit that was rampant around there that even if they did dump the bodies somewhere else, there's no way of tying them to them because there's no DNA, there's no forensics, it's like, oh yeah, that's a body. Anybody know him?
Yep.
No?
Right.
Okay.
And again, like we talked about earlier, they were smart. They're not going to have the bodies on their property.
Right. And what happens some 40 years after they were hung is the Civil War. Now there's probably plenty more bodies that are on that property now. So so you don't it's just because that they couldn't tie the bodies to them doesn't mean shit.
Right. And I mean, how many people there's no accurate number, there's no data on how many people stopped at their inn, disappeared, and were never heard from again.
Right.
So I want to go back to the Old City Jail for a second because I found this too in that same article. In the 137 years that the building was in operation, it not only served as a jail, but also an asylum housing a great variety of inmates, including John and Lavinia Fisher. In the early part of the 1800s, numerous high-sea pirates were jailed here, and after Denmark's Vesey Plan saved slavery revolt in 1822, hundreds were incarcerated waiting their trials. Vesey, a freed slave, planned an insurrection that called for free blacks to assist hundreds of slaves to kill their owners and temporarily seize the city of Charleston before sailing away to Haiti. However, the plot was leaked and hundreds of blacks were arrested in the conspiracy. In total, 67 men were convicted and 35 hanged, including Denmark Vesey. Increased restrictions were afterwards placed on slaves and free blacks, including the law that all black seamen be kept at the jail while they were in port. That was really hard to read without laughing. During the Civil War, both Confederate and federal prisoners of war were incarcerated here. So, again, back to what we were saying. It was a jail. It was an insane asylum. We all know what kind of shit happened in those state places way back then. We've heard all the stories.
We've talked about these stories.
Yeah, so are these ghost hunters are getting at the Old City Jail, Lavinia Fisher? There's no proof to say yes. There's no proof to say no.
Right.
Is she the type of person that you would expect to come back and haunt? Fuck yeah, she is.
Yeah. And we've seen movies like Shocker. We've seen there's a bunch of we've seen what's that one with Michael J. Fox, the Frighteners, where the killer is sent back to finish their work.
Right.
So maybe she's back.
Yeah. I hate when you watch these ghost hunter shows and say, oh, this is who's haunting here. How the fuck do you know? Okay, yeah. If you look into, we've done episodes on the paranormal. We've both done research on the paranormal. Especially if it's a demonic spirit, it's going to lie to you and tell you whoever it wants you to think it is.
Exactly. It's your grandma. No, it's not.
Grandma didn't smell like sulfur. She didn't.
There's no grandma. Only Zool.
Right. So, let's, when you watch these shows, take all that stuff with a grain of salt. It is quite possible that is the person who's haunting there because she was an evil bitch, and it sounds like she would want that as her legacy.
Right. Now,
but no proof.
Exactly. And I want to go back to the whole murder thing, too. Now, they weren't convicted of murder. They were convicted of highway robbery, which, like you said, was still a hanging offense. But in our judicial system, it's best to go with the conviction you can get. Now, a murder trial would have been hard to convict because they were really good at getting rid of the bodies. Now, I want to go back and talk about recently, Gary Ridgway, who was the Green River Killer, was convicted of 47 murders. Okay, probably did closer to 80, but they can convict him on 47. Now, there's another man who's currently serving time named Samuel Little. Now, Samuel Little was already doing life for 3 murders, but he started confessing to the FBI. In over 18 months, he confessed to 93 murders, 50 of which have been confirmed. So now this guy who was convicted of 3 murders just to get him in prison is actually now the most prolific serial killer in U.S. history with 53 confirmed kills.
Wow.
Yeah, and there's he confessed to 93. So if he still remembers, and he's 79 years old, and he just started like the last couple of years telling the FBI about all this. So if he's still sharp enough to remember all these details of 93 of them, good chance there's probably more. And so where I'm going with all that is a lot of times just because, you know, they're convicted of a murder, 2 murders, just some of these serial killers have body counts that are astronomical. That, I mean, that we just don't know about because they're not talking. They never confess to the crimes.
But then you got to wonder about the ones that are talking, because how much of that is inflated to inflate their own ego because they love seeing their name in the press?
Right. That was Henry Lee Lucas and Otis Toole. They confessed to every crime that came across the radio.
Right.
And they did it because, I mean, they were not nice people. Okay. They killed together. They were kind of like part-time lovers. And Otis Toole is actually the one that killed the America's Most Wanted guy.
The host?
Yeah, the host.
Oh,
Killed his son Adam. I can't remember.
Okay. Yep. Okay. I can look it up.
Yeah, he's actually the one that killed his son. So they were not nice people at all.
Right.
But they did it because they got to get out of prison and take trips. They confessed over 2,000 murders collectively, and then they created this whole death hand cult that they were working for, that they were collecting souls for this demonic satanistic cabal that was working out of Florida. Now, when they started piecing John Walsh, and his son Adam was but Otis Toole is the one that kidnapped and killed and beheaded his son. So, which started the whole John Walsh started this whole the victims advocates groups for children.
Right.
The Center for Exploited Children. He started all that.
Well, and kind of go along with Lavinia and John is, I believe they started a trend because in 1865 was Charles Kennedy known as the Old West serial killer. Now, this is just a short article. I'll read the entire article. It's on the Legends of America. Charles Kennedy was a mountain man who lived near Eagle Nest, New Mexico, who robbed and killed a number of passing travelers as the way they made 2 towels. Kennedy, a big, husky, full-bearded man, moved to the Moreno Valley around 1865 with his wife Rosa, a Ute Indian, and their 3-year-old son. The couple then built a traveler's rest stop in an isolated area at the base of Palo Placido Pass on the road between Elizabethtown and Taos. After travelers would register at the rest stop, some would disappear, never to be heard from again. These traveling strangers are rarely missed in this highly transient area. Evidently, when travelers stopped for a bed and a meal, Charles killed them, stole their valuables, and either burned or buried their bodies. These events might never have been known except for his wife's confession, which she fled from in terror in the fall of 1870. The bleeding woman burst into John Pearson's saloon, where Clay Allison, David Crockett, a nephew of the American frontiersman, and others were whiling away the hours. After she had been helped to a chair, she told the story of how her husband had killed a traveler and their young son, Hysterically, she continued the shocking storytelling of how her husband had been luring travelers, perhaps as many as 14, into the cabin and then murdering them. On the day that she fled, she had witnessed another traveler who her husband had enticed inside by offering supper. During the meal, the passerby asked his host if there were Indians around. Her unfortunate son made the fatal mistake responding, "Can't you smell the one Papa put under the floor?" And Miss Kennedy went into a fury, shot his guest, and bashed his son's head against the fireplace. He then threw both bodies into the cellar, locked his wife in the house, and drank himself into a stupor. Terrified, the woman waited until her husband passed out and climbed up through the chimney and escaped to tell her story. Clay Allison, a hard-drinking, bad-tempered local rancher who was known for his gunfighting skills and was almost always around when anything violent happened, led a group in search of Kennedy. While others were sent to search the house for evidence to support the woman's story, the search provided a number of partially charred human bones still burning in the fire and 2 skeletons beneath the house. Later, another skull was found nearby, and a witness to one of the murders came forward. Kennedy, still drunk, was quickly found and taken into custody. He was given a pre-trial October 3rd, 1870, where the witness appeared testifying that he had seen Kennedy shoot one of the travelers. The court ordered that Kennedy be held for action by the grand jury, but rumors began circulating that Kennedy's lawyers were going to buy his freedom. 3 days later, Allison and his companion snatched Kennedy from the jail, threw a rope around his neck, dragged him by a horse up and down Main Street until long after he was dead. His body was not allowed by the townspeople to be buried in a Catholic cemetery and was interred outside the cemetery boundaries. Allegedly, Allison staked Kennedy's head on a fence in front of the saloon in Elizabethtown.
Wow. Put his head out. That's crazy.
Yeah, right? But again, the travelers and the inn.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a tale as old as time. I mean, we made movies out of it. Psycho comes to mind.
A tale as old as time.
Right?
Heads on a pike out front.
It's, Psycho was a movie based off the same type of thing.
Right.
Serial killer. Got a hotel with my mom's corpse sitting in it. So, yeah, go ahead.
So going back to her last words, and you brought up Eileen Wuornos.
Yeah.
I wanted to see if I could find what Eileen's last words were, and I'll read them verbatim. This is great.
Awesome.
I'd just like to say I'm sailing with the Rock, and I'll be back like Independence Day with Jesus, June 6th, like the movie, big mothership and all. I'll be back.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I've been crazy.
Yeah.
But then again, but again, how much of the stuff that we know, that most people know about Eileen Wuornos is just from the movie?
Right, exactly.
I raise my hand because that's all I know. I haven't done my research on her because a lot of times doing that stuff, I just feel dirty.
Right. But I think one of my favorite ones is a guy named Thomas J. Grasso. He was executed in '95 in Oklahoma, and before they carried out his thing, his last words were, "I did not get my SpaghettiOs. I got spaghetti. I want the press to know this."
Nice. There's us. I mean, it's interesting because when we think of serial killers, we're always thinking of the 20th century.
Yeah.
Right. Some people will go, "Oh, Jack the Ripper," but for the most part, people think, "Oh, Ted Bundy." The dude who ate people.
Dahmer.
Yeah. So that's what people think. They're thinking the 80s and the 70s and the 20th century.
Yeah, which was some refer to as the golden age of serial killers, because it was before DNA and police departments didn't speak to one another very often. So it was easy for, as long as you didn't kill in the same jurisdiction, it was really easy to get away with it.
Right.
And
no,
go ahead.
Go on with yours because I'm going off another rabbit.
Okay, so when we say the first female serial killer, we're obviously talking about America. Okay, well, this is America. We forgot to we have a lot of international listeners, so we forgot to preface that, because there's obviously the legendary Bathory, Elizabeth Bathory, that was centuries before Miss Fisher and the crimes that she committed. So in there, even that, a lot of that is disputable. But we're talking American female serial killers here.
Yeah, and
If you haven't figured that out by now.
And eventually we may stray into the international scene.
We'd like to do Bathory eventually.
Yeah,
that's a crazy case.
So speaking of weird, there's another family. I'm not gonna read this thing because I'm still trying to catch my breath from the last one. But there was a family of American serial killers. They're the vicious harpies from the 1700s, the late 1700s.
The harpies?
Yeah, Harpes.
Okay.
Yeah, they're the last name is actually Harpe. I think to put the S just because it fit the title better. But yeah, that's something you should check out. So all of our listeners out there, go look them up.
We might do an episode on them.
Yeah. But yeah, we'll see. But yeah, so what makes a serial killer though? I mean, if we take it like everything else that we talk about, we have to put it in its time frame, correct?
Right.
So back in that time, murdering 2 or 3 people is serial killing.
Yeah.
How often would you see people really? Population was less dense, People were
exactly. Even when you look at, so take a look at a map or the night sky picture of Earth from basically anywhere, but I'm referring to the United States. If you look at, or Australia even, if you look at the nighttime where you see all the lights where the populations are, you see these huge chunks of darkness. And that's today. Like the entire center of like Australia is like black. And there's a lot of killers that travel those roads picking up people. In America, this is how it was back then too, where there were huge areas where there just wasn't anybody. So dumping a body didn't mean you had to bury him. You just shot him and just left him.
Right. And they were eaten by animals.
They may have never been found.
Right.
And if you get west of the Mississippi in the United States, there are huge chunks of darkness. Yeah. Unpopulated areas. Now, when we refer to serial killer, we're going to use the actual definition, which typically it means murders of 3 or more people at different times.
Right.
Okay. If they all happen at the same time, they're technically a spree killer.
Or a mass murder.
Or a mass murderer. So, or yeah, that's mass murder, spree, So for somebody to technically be a serial killer, which if you've seen the show Mindhunter, they're the guys that the behavioral science team from the FBI are the ones that coined the term serial killer. But why are they this way? I don't know. We've mentioned before that Warren was probably started as an opportunist.
Yeah.
I mentioned Tommy Lynn Sells that was just a bad seed and equated pain with pleasure.
Right.
Hate with love.
Right. And there's so many that were never caught, like Jack the Ripper, that we'll never know.
Exactly. We don't know what his motive was. Was he harvesting parts just for fun?
Yeah. Some people do it just to, there's been cases where people do it just to fuck with the police.
Yeah.
So you never know. We'll never know what makes these people the way they are.
Mm-hmm.
We're not in their psyche. We're not in their heads. And God, thank you for that. 'Cause I don't want to be. It would be just traumatic as hell. But what gives them that pleasure? Are there people that are just born evil?
There's a big debate over nature versus nurture, but I do believe that I think those help. I think a good nature would actually help stop some of this behavior, and I think bad nurture kind of can help
encourage
uh,
it. Yeah.
escalate these things. I think there's a lot of people out there that are born with these thoughts, and I won't go as far as say desires, but I think background and environment can play a lot into the decision making that you make on whether or not you go after or uh, let the impulses take over.
Because we live in the society we live in, I am going to throw this out. Because it's something to think about, and I'm not saying it's right or any aspect of it, but as we say with sexuality, you don't choose your sexuality. You're born with this notion of who you are and what you like.
Right.
Are they born the same way?
I think so. My personal, I mean, like, I know I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a doctor, I'm not, but I do believe that I think they're just born this way.
Yeah. Well, and I do too, but I mean, it comes down to, I mean, yeah, neither one of us are psychologists, but we're both fascinated with how the human mind works.
Mm-hmm.
And we're both always trying to figure out what is the motive and, what could turn somebody. I mean, you could have, as we talk about Ted Bundy, I'm sure at some point we'll do one on him, but one of the most charismatic people you'll ever meet.
Right. The fucking judge said it would have been an honor to have you work in my court under different circumstances.
Right.
And then he sentenced him to death.
But yeah, I mean, it's just some of these people, you just don't know,
Mm-hmm.
and like the stories of Fisher and the story of the guy married to the Indian in New Mexico. Again, they're stories. We don't have abject proof of either.
That's a good point. That's a good point. These are, like the website that we got some of our stuff from, Legends of America.
Right.
Like we'll do Bathory eventually, but most of that is legend. There's no, it's stories passed on from person to person to person. And you already mentioned before the telephone game.
Yeah. Yeah. And so how much of this is true and how much of this has been exaggerated?
Yeah.
And how many times, when somebody tells a story, their first instinct is to embellish the story so they can keep the listeners captivated.
I do it.
Yeah, I probably did it.
I may not change the facts of it, but I throw in adjectives to make it
more
appealing.
I'll do that, or I'll try to throw in a voice that make it sound.
Exactly. Do we do it maliciously to change the narrative? No. It's like you said, it's just try to make. Most of the time, we're not news reporters. We're not trying to just say the facts. We're trying to captivate. We're trying to entertain. And we both do that as a nature.
Yep.
We've been nurtured into being that nature to
right
to talk like that. But we also know, and then there's the other thing too. There's honest to God people that just have, something wrong upstairs where, they're mentally handicapped and they just don't understand what they're doing is wrong.
Right. Now, have you ever met somebody that you think could be a serial killer?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to stop you real quick and let everybody know. I'm going to let Jason tell a story because I have to run to the bathroom real quick, and I should be done by the time he's back. All right.
Okay. So I was at it was a bonfire. We were invited over to somebody's house, and it was me, my brother, my father, my mom, and then a few other people. I'm not going to name them so people can figure out where this all took place. So we're at this bonfire, and people are, we're drinking some beers, we're just hanging out, and there's this one guy there that's just not right. Mentally challenged, obviously, but very, very aggressive in how he was speaking, how he was approaching people, and he was obviously not very well educated, if educated at all. So I was trying to tell him that I live, this happened in the Midwest, and I was trying to tell him that I lived in Washington State. It's like, no, I don't live around here. He was asking me, where are you from? I was like, well, I don't live around here. I came out here to visit my family. I'm from Washington State. And he's like, oh, across the river? What the fuck do you mean across the river? This is when I realized that, oh, this guy isn't very smart. They're like, no, it's a different state. We have to take a plane to get there. Oh, the plane goes over the river. I'm like, what the fuck is he talking about, river? All right. So yeah. So after bed, it's like, yeah. And then my father said something. It's like, it wasn't even meant to be judgmental or anything like that. And he's like, he just kind of said it, to me kind of under his breath. It's like, it's a long river. It's a wide river. Something like that. And I've never seen somebody flip like that. And some of the other people had to actually subdue this guy from trying to attack my father and me at that time, because he was just, I've never seen somebody go it was like a dog. Huh. He went from just like, oh yeah, I mean, to just instant. I mean, I've never seen that violent a rage where I was honestly scared. And there's the it's not politically correct, but there's the term out there, retard strong. This man was like that. He was a bull. He was an ox. And then after this, he was trying to pick up huge tree stumps that were cut off for the bonfire. He's trying to pick the whole thing up and put it on the fire. Without supervision and without medication, I do believe this man could have went off and killed a bunch of people. Whether he did or not afterwards, I don't know. But that was one of the few people in my entire life that have ever truly been scared of.
Right, but you said that you felt that he had a mental illness.
Yes, it was mental. His was definitely mental. He had a mental problem. He had learning disorders. Yeah. Like I said, he thought the state of Washington was on the other side of the river, and we were in the Midwest. So it's technically the other side of Mississippi. But
now, for me, I think I may have met one person that I am unsure of if they could or not.
Mm-hmm.
And this was, this was back when I was only 20 years old. I had this friend that I worked with his wife at these group homes, and he was this Australian guy. And we would drink together, and we're both interested in the same things. And, we moved to Chicago for a month, and we did it in January. The wrong month to move to Chicago.
Right.
So we come back, we get a car, we move down to Florida at like the beginning of February and stay there till March, and we're living in a Ford Escort station wagon the entire time we're down there. Now, we were pretty good friends, but living in such close quarters, I mean, this guy is probably like 6'3", and we're living in a Ford Escort station wagon. It's not big.
Yeah.
With all of our stuff in it. And, we're showering on the beach every day, working for labor companies during the day, and then partying at night.
Yeah.
Well, we did some demo work from the labor company for this group that are working on an old IBM building, and they found out what our situation was. Like, if you want, we don't lock the back door. You can come in at night, crash out in here. We're cool. Mm. And this is probably about the 6th week of us doing this.
Mm.
And we go in there, and then we set up our stuff. We hit a nightclub, and we come back, and we're sitting there. And this guy there's always just something off on him. Extremely intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
And, so we're sitting, and he's always talking about doing shit that's illegal.
Okay.
And so we're sitting there, and he says, back when I was home as a boy growing up in Australia, I read this book. There's over 100 ways that you can kill somebody and hide the body and get away with it.
That's not something you want to hear when you're sitting alone in a building.
Yeah. In an abandoned building, basically.
Yeah.
So at that point, I'm like, Yeah, it's time for me to go back to Michigan. Because
Yeah.
there was just something about that. It felt like a threat.
Mm.
It honestly felt like a threat. So at that point, I was like, I think we need to go back to Michigan and start over without each other.
Yeah.
Because after we got back to Michigan, I distanced myself from him completely and had nothing to do with him after that.
Yeah. Good choice. Good choice. Yeah. You probably would end up in a swamp somewhere.
Yeah, gator bait.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I had a neighbor a couple years ago that, now, it could have just been the fact that he worked graveyard, but every window in his house was blacked out. Curtains were always drawn, blinds were always shut, never mowed his backyard, hired somebody to mow his front yard. And it was just creepy that on his back porch there was just one chair, one plastic chair that was just basically covered in, like those plastic chairs, after a while they start to turn black.
Mm-hmm.
That's how this chair, it just sat there and sat there and sat there. So we had no idea what went on inside the home. Never saw anybody come, never saw anybody go other than him. But
Right.
we always joked about him being a serial killer.
God.
So I always waved and said hi when I saw him.
Imagine that, think about the psyche. Okay, I worked graveyards for years.
Mm-hmm.
I never went so far as to black out my windows and all that other shit.
Every window in his house was that way.
Yeah, I didn't cut daylight. I didn't cut light out altogether.
Yeah, which it's not healthy to do. You need sun.
Yeah,
we're like plants. We need sun.
Yeah, without that, you sink into depressions, and depressions could lead you down some weird fucking paths.
Exactly, like blacking out every fucking window in your house
and becoming a serial killer.
Yes. So, all right. Full circle here. Back to Miss Fisher.
Back to Miss Fisher.
So,
would you let her entice you and drink a cup of her tea?
I'm a sucker, and I probably would drink the tea.
I don't like hot tea, so I probably wouldn't have.
Oh, see, I do.
Yeah.
I'm not like a tea drinker,
right.
But every once in a while, it's like when I go to a Chinese restaurant, I always drink the tea.
Right.
So if it was handed to me, it's like, oh, cool, thanks. I'll drink the tea.
I probably would have taken a sip to be polite.
Right. I don't know if I would have been ballsy enough to dump it.
No. But it also depends on where he dumped it. And none of these stories tell you where he dumped it.
Exactly.
None of these stories tell you where.
Did you dump the tea or did you piss on my floor?
Right. And it's like, because both Lavinia and John are there.
Yeah.
And he said when she wasn't looking. Well, he was still there.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to assume, because at one point they said that John had got excused himself and went out, and then when he came back, they said there was a room available.
There was a time when I was at a high school party and a bug flew into my Solo cup. I dumped the Solo cup, and everybody knows, what, you like beer? Now with a fucking bug in it, I don't. Right. So I couldn't do that without anybody noticing. So how did he dump a glass of tea in a house?
Right.
Unless there was water already all over the floor.
Yeah. And like as a kid, I hated milk and eventually developed lactose intolerance, which I probably stemmed from my hatred of milk. But so we had a picnic and they gave me a glass of milk, and then when I thought nobody's looking, I dumped it out. But my grandpa saw it.
Oh.
I'll beat my ass, my dad's dad.
Mm-hmm.
And he just reamed me out for it. And I'm like, I don't like milk. Quit making me drink it.
Right. I haven't do a lot in didn't like mustard, didn't like.
No, I liked mustard.
Who was it that didn't like mustard? And Grandma put it.
She put it on my hands because I had this nervous tick of licking my fingertips.
Okay, that's what it was.
Yeah.
I knew she put mustard on somebody's hands, or hands or feet. I don't remember.
Yeah, it was me
because I was used to like sucking my toes.
Yeah.
But she didn't hate me. But
right.
At least I don't think she did.
No, I don't know this. Our parents have stories of our grandparents that I don't want to hear.
No.
Because I want to keep the images I have of my grandparents the way they are.
Yes.
So.
Exactly.
So anyways, yes, Lavinia Fisher and John Fisher were part of a highway gang, ran a hotel called the 6 Mile Hotel because it was 6 miles from Charlton, South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
They stole shit from them. They were brutal people. They were both executed. And they're said to haunt the Old City Jail today.
There you go. There is the first female American serial killer.
Right. But do we call it the first female serial killer or the first married serial killers?
Oh, the killer couple like the
Bonnie
Knoxes,
and Clyde, you know.
Mick and Mallory.
Yeah, because they were before Bonnie and Clyde.
Oh, way before, yeah.
Yeah, so do we call them the first female, or do we call them the first married couple serial killers?
We'd have to research to see if there was any other couples like that. But if there was any other couples like that, then she would have been the first serial killer.
Right. Or do we just call her the baddest bitch to walk the planet?
There you go.
So yes, folks, that was our episode for today. If there's something you'd like to hear us talk about, leave us a note and put it in the comments. Shoot us an email. Jason will put our email in our bios underneath the video. So shoot us an email. We'll check it out. Still waiting on those ghost stories from you people.
Absolutely. And this probably won't be the last serial killer episode we do.
Oh no, God.
But we'll do serial killers that you care about, not the ones that you don't give a shit about, and we'll mix them in with all the rest of the stuff. We're just kind of trying to expand our group here, and we chose this one. Actually, let me reiterate that Craig chose this one because there's a paranormal edge to it at the end.
Yes.
And we got to say fuck ghost hunters again.
Right. Again, if you want to make a show, I'm all for you making a show. Just cut out all the extra bullshit that we don't need.
Exactly. All right. With that, I'm going to say insert tagline here.
Peace out. Love you guys.